Let's bring in Caitlin Huey-Burns, Antjuan Seawright, and Molly Hooper. Caitlin is a CBSN political reporter. Antjuan is a CBSN political contributor and Democratic strategist. And Molly is a CBSN political contributor. Welcome to all of you. Let's start with Joe Biden. Biden campaign aides, Antjuan, tell CBS News that the former vice president is expected to try focusing most of his attention on President Trump. Tell us about sort of the benefits politically of trying to do that, despite what could be some attacks coming his way.
Very smart strategy on behalf of his campaign and the VP. Look, we're not running against each other. We're running for our party's nomination. And this is just the primary process serves as a political scrimmage. The big game is against Donald Trump and the Republican Party in November. So I think it's laser focus smart for the vice president to focus on Trump, because at the end of the day, no matter who the nominee is, that's what they'll be facing. And for the vice president, to whom much is given, much is required of, there are going to be attacks at him. But I think if he pivots and focus his attention on Donald Trump, not only does that help him with potential primary voters, it helps him make the argument why he is the most credible candidate to take on Donald Trump, because you don't attack someone who's not the front runner.
So for the other candidates, though, Antjuan, as a strategist, should they be focusing on Biden?
Absolutely. What we've seen and heard from voters consistently, not the Beltway voters, not the coastal elites. What we've heard from everyday voters is they want to know what Democrats are for. They want the answers, or they want a policy agenda or a policy prescription that will heal some of the brokenness we've seen for generations in this country, particularly African-American voters who arguably will decide not only who our next nominee will be, will have a large say-so on who the next president of the United States will be. So for every other person minus Biden, I think their strategy should be to block and tackle. For Joe Biden, his strategy simply should be run offensive plays, because his offense tonight will be his best defense.
All right, so Caitlin, you're there in Miami in the spin room. You spoke with Meredith Kelly earlier. She's the communications director for Senator Kirsten Gillibrand's campaign, and you asked her how the senator prepared for tonight. Let's listen to that.
Well, we've been preparing pretty extensively and are taking this really seriously, because we know this is the first opportunity for viewers to really have a chance to directly compare the candidates all in one place. So our prep has been mainly focused on how can she best utilize what will be a short amount of time to convey who she is, her experience as a senator, and her vision for the future and how she plans to deliver for American families. So that has included some mock debates where we sort of have her at a podium, which is always good practice, mainly practicing the length of answers, because 60 seconds can go very quickly.
So, Caitlin, how does her preparation compare to others?
Well, the senator had been considered a rising star in the Democratic Party. But when it came to the primary, she's been lower down in the polls. She just recently made the debate stage. So tonight is particularly meaningful for her. And she really is seeking a breakout moment to continue on in this campaign. But what's really interesting is that I've been hearing from all of the campaigns, they have all been watching last night's debate, adding a new element into this whole dynamic. They were taking some notes, paying attention to what questions were asked, what issues the moderators focused on, and whether or not it made sense strategically to go after a certain candidate or focus on themselves. What I did hear tonight, too, from other campaigns, including from Gillibrand's campaign, is that they noticed that Donald Trump was not mentioned that much last night. And they all say that tonight that is going to be different. Tonight we have several contenders who are considered at the top tier: Bernie Sanders, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Mayor Pete Buttigieg, who have been polling kind of higher up in the pack. They really want to draw this contrast with Donald Trump, because they know that people paying attention tonight are really trying to learn how these candidates would stack up against the current president. So in addition to taking notes about how the other candidates did last night, they also are going to be introducing new elements tonight, going after the president more specifically.
Well, Caitlin, you also spoke with Ian Sams today. He's Kamala Harris's national press secretary, and you asked him what Senator Harris's plan is for tonight. Let's listen to that.
First, I think she's going to define her agenda like she did in South Carolina this past weekend in a speech where she talked about the 3A.
All right, I think we've lost Caitlin's feed there. We'll let you know if it comes back. But we started to hear, Antjuan, the strategy for Senator Kamala Harris. She's someone who was there in South Carolina. We saw her last week.
Look, if it was smart for her to take the momentum from South Carolina into tonight's debate and take that energy and make it transferable along the way. What I think Ian was about to say, because he and I had a brief conversation earlier, is the fact that the majority of the people who will end up voting for Kamala Harris, they're not yet paying attention. We call them 3 a.m. voters. They pay attention at the last minute. And so tonight for her is to simply reintroduce herself to the voters, but remind people about the differences between her candidacy and other people on the stage, but also remind African-American women that you have one of your own seeking the party's nomination for the first time in my generation. And that says something about the stage we have tonight, but we cannot press the ignore button, the fact that she not only comes into this debate as an African-American female, but also an Alpha Kappa Alpha and a member of the Lynx and a graduate and a graduate of a historical Black college and university. All those things give her some infrastructure that not many of the other candidates enjoy coming into tonight's debate.
Yeah. So Molly,
I was just kind of laughing because I heard Alpha Kappa Alpha, which is a sorority, and for those who don't know, it's a sorority, and it's it gives her a lot of street cred, so to speak.
Yeah. So we have Caitlin Huey-Burns back with us. So Caitlin, we were talking about how you spoke with Ian Sams. What did he say that Senator Harris actually was able to take away from watching last night's debate?
Well, they were paying attention to how much time was allotted to each candidate, what the issues were. And for Kamala Harris, I think she was probably paying attention to the questions about health care. Supporting Medicare for all is something that a bill that she does support. But earlier this year, she talked about eliminating or supporting eliminating private insurance, and then walked that back a little bit and said there are multiple ways to get to universal health care. And she advocates for a lot of different options. But I think what you're going to see her try to stress tonight is her career as a prosecutor. We've been hearing this in her stump speeches over the past couple of weeks, her focus on Donald Trump and saying that she has the experience as a prosecutor to make this case against Donald Trump. Now, earlier in the campaign, there was some criticism from the left about her record there, but the campaign seems to think that this is a positive thing that she should be talking about, and we've seen her work that out in some of these speeches and really get a lot of applause from various audiences that we've seen her in. So I would look for her to make that case, focusing on the president, and I'm also curious to see if she tries to draw contrasts with any other rivals on the stage. Remember last week, she was very critical of Joe Biden's comments that he made at that fundraiser about working with segregationists to get things done. She will pay attention to whether that comes up at all tonight and whether she just stays on message. I think a lot of these candidates tonight we're watching last night to see kind of how and when to jump in. So if a question isn't directed to you, how to get back in the conversation, because you really want to stay kind of in the mix here.
Right, with so many candidates, that's a critical point. So Molly, there is also this generational difference that we have to note here. You have Mayor Pete Buttigieg, who is the youngest in the race at 37. Senator Bernie Sanders is the oldest at 77. How much of a factor do you expect that could be tonight?
Well, it's interesting. It could be a factor, but it feels like tonight, even though Buttigieg would be 38 on election day, it feels like tonight's crop of candidates, he's sitting at the adult table. I mean, for the most part, you have a lot of mature, older candidates. Biden's also 76. You have an older, more seasoned group of candidates. Gillibrand's in her 50s, and you also have Bennett in his 50s, Harris is 56. I think that it'll be interesting to see how the crowd reacts to that. And keep in mind that even though Bernie Sanders is the oldest on the stage, he also has the youngest group of followers and supporters. And as we were talking about before this, when I'm on Capitol Hill, and actually I've seen it several times, when Bernie Sanders walks down the hallway on a regular day, he's just walking down the hallway, groups of people who are visiting other senators will stop and applaud him like a rock star. And one day, and this is several months ago, he and Cory Booker were walking together, and it was Bernie who received all the applause. It's these younger, more woke, liberal, activist, progressive individuals like an Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, this left-leaning side of the party that Bernie Sanders really appeals to, and they're the youngest ones out there.
Right. Experience could make the difference tonight. There are two people on the stage who've been in presidential debates. Joe Biden had his first presidential debate 32 years ago today in South Carolina, Bernie Sanders last cycle. And I will tell you, yes, Bernie appeals to those voters, but that just because they like him do not mean they want to marry him. And in politics, there's a difference between liking a candidate and wanting to marry them politically. And we found out in the last election in 2016, there were a lot of people who liked Bernie Sanders. They showed up at his rallies, they retweeted him, but they did not want to marry him in the end. They married Hillary Clinton in a Democratic primary. So we have to see if that relationship plays out the same way.
Yeah, well, that Democratic wedding, though, is not quite so far away, though, right?
Right around the corner.
That's right.
Yeah.
And the Democrats in California, they married him during their primary, and he beat Hillary Clinton.
But that didn't translate to winning
the
big prize, the nomination.
That's true.
And guess what else it didn't do? It did not translate to those voters coming across the finish line with Hillary Clinton to help push her across the finish line in the general election. And that's what it should all be about.
And you know what's interesting about that is if you're talking to, and these are the individuals on the Hill, these younger, more liberal groups like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Rashida Tlaib, Ayanna Pressley, Ilhan Omar, that group, they're in office right now. So will individuals who are left-leaning and do not want to compromise on things, will they compromise in the Democratic primary? That's my question.
I don't think it's about compromise. It's about doing the right thing for the long-term bill of health of this party.
Caitlin, what about you? I mean, I want you to weigh in here because you're there and you're talking to a lot of these campaign officials. What are you hearing?
Absolutely. I mean, Bernie Sanders has, besides Joe Biden, really has the most practice with this in terms of a presidential level debate. But he also has a huge challenge ahead of him because a lot of these ideas he was talking about in 2016 are now mainstream in the party. We've seen him lose ground to people like Elizabeth Warren and other candidates. So, yes, while Bernie Sanders does have an intense, loyal following, they are also starting to get to know some of these other candidates and believing that they might be, better off in the end. So that's something to watch tonight and I've heard this from the campaign, that they want Bernie Sanders to reestablish himself as kind of the leader of where they believe the Democratic Party is right now. They also expect him to draw real contrasts with Joe Biden, who will be standing right next to him at center stage there. So they don't want to attack Biden personally, but they really do want to draw these contrasts on policy, from everything to health care, to the Iraq war vote, and other items in between. And I think you'll see the other candidates point to both of them and say, look, that's not where we want to go. We need a fresher face, newer ideas, and kind of a newer process. But back to the loyalty question. All Democrats that I talked to, from the campaigns to the voters, they're prioritizing winning in 2016. They've learned, winning in 2020. They've learned from 2016. They don't want division. They all want to rally around the eventual nominee, and that's also top of mind for them tonight.
Yeah, it's such a complex host of factors when you do the political calculus for the Democrats here. It'll be fascinating to see how it plays out. Caitlin Huey-Burns, Molly Hooper, and Antjuan Seawright, thanks to you all. Really appreciate it.